The dust clouds settled around the broken carriage as Mary watched the last horse disappear over the hill. Her hand moved instinctively to her rounded belly, feeling the baby kick as if sensing her fear. The Wyoming wilderness stretched endlessly, in every direction, with nothing but sagebrush and distant mountains to keep her company. Just 3 weeks ago, everything had been different. Her husband Robert had been making plans for their new life in California, talking excitedly about the land they would buy and the house they would build for their growing family. He had worked so hard to save money for this journey, taking on extra jobs and selling almost everything they owned back in Missouri. The dream felt so real then, so possible, but fever took him quickly. One day he was fine, the next he was burning, up with sickness that no amount of cool water or prayer could cure. She had nursed him day and night in their small tent, but nothing helped. When he passed away on that cold morning, Mary felt like her whole world cracked in half. His business partner, a man named Frank, had promised to help her get to California. "Don't you worry about nothing," he had said, patting her shoulder with what seemed like kindness. "Robert was my friend. I'll make sure you and that baby get where you need to go." For 2 weeks, Frank had been helpful enough. He shared his food, helped her pack up Robert's things, and even fixed a loose wheel on their carriage. But this morning everything changed. She woke up to find Frank loading their last horse with supplies, getting ready to leave. "Where are you going?" she had asked, confused and still sleepy. "I'm heading back east," Frank replied, not meeting her eyes. "This journey's too dangerous for a woman in your condition." "But what about me? What about getting to California?" Frank shrugged and pointed to a paper in his hand. "Robert owed me money, more than you knew about. This horse, the wagon, even some of your supplies, they're mine now. I'm taking what's owed to me." Mary stared at the paper, seeing Robert's signature at the bottom. Her heart sank as she realized Frank was telling the truth. Robert had borrowed money for their journey, probably trying to make sure they had enough for emergencies. Now that debt was coming due and she had nothing left to pay it with. "You can't just leave me here," she pleaded. "I'm 7 months pregnant. There's nothing for miles." "There's a trading post about 2 days west," Frank said, mounting the horse. "You can walk there, or maybe someone will come along to help." He looked down at her one last time. "I'm sorry, Mary, but business is business." And just like that, he rode away, leaving her alone with a broken carriage and a baby coming in just 2 months. Mary sat down hard on a nearby rock, feeling overwhelmed. The carriage wheel was cracked, the axle bent from when they hit that deep rut yesterday. The harness was torn in 3 places, and without a horse, it didn't matter anyway. Her food supplies would last maybe a week if she was careful. After that, she didn't know what would happen. She looked around at the empty landscape. The nearest town was probably 50 miles away, too far to walk in her condition. The trading post Frank mentioned might be closer, but she had no way of knowing. For sure, other travelers did use this trail, but not every day. She could wait and hope someone would help, but what if no one came? The baby kicked again, stronger this time. Mary placed both hands on her belly and felt tears starting to come. "What are we going to do, little one?" she whispered. "Your daddy would know what to do, but I'm scared I'm not strong enough for this," she cried for a few minutes, letting herself feel the fear and sadness. But then something inside her started to change. Maybe it was thinking about Robert and how hard he had worked for their dream. Maybe it was feeling the baby move and knowing she was responsible for this tiny life. Or maybe it was just stubbornness, the same quality that had made her marry a dreamer and head west in the first place. Mary wiped her eyes and stood up. She walked around the carriage, really looking at it for the first time. The damage was bad, but maybe not impossible to fix. Robert had taught her a few things about repairs during their journey. She knew which parts were most important, and she had watched him work on other problems they had faced. In the back of the wagon, she found Robert's small collection of tools, a hammer, some nails, a knife, and a piece of rope. Not much, but it was something. She also had needle and thread for sewing, and Robert's leather belt was still in their travel trunk. The broken wheel would be the biggest challenge. The wooden spokes were cracked and the metal rim was bent. But maybe, if she could find the right materials, she could make it work again. There had to be other broken wagons along this trail. People had been traveling this route for years, and not everyone made it through safely. As the sun climbed higher, Mary decided to explore the area. About a quarter-mile back, she found the remains of an old campsite. Someone had left behind pieces of broken wood, some metal scraps, and even part of a wheel that looked like it might fit her carriage. It wasn't in good shape, but it was better than what she had. She spent the rest of the day carrying pieces back to her carriage, making multiple trips despite her growing tiredness. Her back ached and her feet were swollen, but she kept working. Every piece of salvaged material felt like hope. That evening, as she sat by a small fire eating beans from a can, Mary made a decision. She wasn't going to wait for rescue. She wasn't going to give up on Robert's dream or accept that she was helpless. Somehow, some way, she was going to fix this carriage and get herself and her baby to safety. The stars came out bright and clear in the big Wyoming sky. Mary looked up at them and imagined Robert watching over her. "I'm going to do this," she said out loud. "I don't know how yet, but I'm going to figure it out. Our baby deserves a chance at the life you wanted for us." Tomorrow, she would start working. She would use every bit of knowledge Robert had shared with her, every skill she had learned as a farmer's daughter back in Missouri. She would tear apart her own clothes if she had to, melt down her jewelry for metal, and work until her hands bled if that's what it took. The wind picked up, making the fire dance and casting moving shadows on the broken carriage. But for the first time since Frank rode away, Mary didn't feel afraid. She felt determined. The woman who had started this journey as Robert's wife was about to become something new, a survivor who would let nothing stop her from protecting her child and honoring her husband's memory. The morning sun was barely up when Mary started her work. Her hands were already sore from yesterday's efforts, but she couldn't afford to rest. Every day that passed made her situation more dangerous. The baby was getting heavier, making it harder to move around, and winter was coming fast to Wyoming. She had spent half the night thinking about the broken wheel. The crack ran deep through two of the wooden spokes, and the metal rim was bent so badly it wouldn't roll straight. But Mary remembered watching her father fix wagon wheels back on their farm in Missouri. He used to say that wood could be stronger when it was broken and fixed right than when it was new. First, she needed to take the wheel completely apart. Using Robert's knife and the small hammer, she carefully removed the metal pieces holding everything together. Her hands shook a little as she worked, not from fear, but from the effort of trying to be precise. When her belly made it hard to get close to her work, the wooden spokes came apart easier than she expected. They were cracked. Beyond saving, but the others might work if she could find replacements. Mary looked at the pile of salvaged wood she had collected yesterday. Most of it was too thin or too damaged, but there was one piece from an old wagon tongue that might work. She spent the morning cutting and shaping the wood with Robert's knife. It was slow, careful work. Every few minutes she had to stop and rest her back, feeling the baby shift and kick inside her. Sometimes she talked to the baby while she worked, explaining what she was doing like Robert used to explain things to her. "See, little one, we're making this spoke just the right size," she would say, running her hand over the smooth wood. "Your daddy always said measure twice, cut once. We don't have materials to waste." By noon, her new wooden spokes were ready. They weren't perfect. They were a little thicker than the originals, and the wood was a different color, but they were strong. Now came the hard part, putting everything back together. The metal rim was her biggest challenge. Mary had never worked with metal before, but she knew it could be heated and shaped. She built up her fire using dry sagebrush and pieces of old wood, trying to get it hot enough to soften the bent metal. It took several tries, and she burned her fingers more than once, but slowly the rim started to straighten out. While the metal cooled, she worked on the harness. The leather straps were torn in multiple places, probably from when the horse had gotten spooked and pulled too hard. Mary had some experience with leather work from mending her father's farming equipment. But she had never fixed anything this complicated. She cut strips from Robert's leather belt, the one he had worn every day of their marriage. It felt wrong. At first, like she was destroying something precious, but then she realized this was exactly what Robert would want. He had always been practical about using what they had to solve problems. The needle was too small for the thick leather, so Mary heated it in the fire and used the hammer to make it bigger. Her fingers were getting more swollen every day, making the detailed work harder, but she kept going. Each stitch had to be perfect because her life and her baby's life depended on this harness holding together. On the third day, a family in a covered wagon stopped to see if she needed help. The man, who introduced himself as Tom, looked at her. Work with surprise. "Ma'am, I've got to say I've never seen anything like this," he said, examining her repaired wheel. "You did all this yourself?" "I did what I had to do," Mary replied. Not wanting to make a big deal of it, Tom's wife, Linda, climbed down from their wagon. She was younger than Mary, maybe 20, and she stared with wide eyes at the pregnant woman covered in dirt and grease. "Honey, you can't be out here alone in your condition," Linda said. "Come with us, we're heading to Denver. You can have the baby there safely." Mary was tempted. The offer was kind, and Denver would certainly be safer than the wilderness. But Denver wasn't California. It wasn't the place Robert had dreamed about, where he had planned to build their new life. "Thank you," Mary said carefully. "But I'm heading west to California. My husband and we had plans," Tom frowned. "Ma'am, with respect, those plans were made when you had a husband. Things are different now." "The plans are still good," Mary said firmly. "I just have to work a little harder to make them happen." The family stayed for an hour, sharing some of their food and offering advice. Tom helped her lift a heavy wheel back onto the axle, something she had been dreading trying to do alone. Before they left, Linda gave her a small jar of salve for her cut and burned hands. "You're the strongest woman I've ever met," Linda whispered as they said goodbye. "I hope you make it to California. I really do." After they left, Mary felt both encouraged and lonely. It was good to know that people thought her work was impressive, but it also reminded her how alone she really was. Still, she had made real progress. The wheel was fixed and working, the harness was patched and strong, and she had figured out solutions to problems she never thought she could handle. That evening, she tested everything by pulling the empty carriage in a small circle around her campsite. The wheel rolled smoothly, the patched axle held steady, and the repaired harness felt secure. It wasn't pretty work. You could see every patch and replacement piece, but it was solid. Over the next few days, word of the pregnant woman fixing her own wagon seemed to spread among the travelers on the trail. People started calling her Iron Mary when they talked about her in the trading posts and camps. Some folks made detours just to see the woman who was rebuilding a carriage with her bare hands. Most were kind and encouraging. A few offered to buy her work, saying they could use someone with her skills in their towns. But some looked at her like she was crazy or unnatural. A woman doing man's work while carrying a child. Mary didn't care what any of them thought. Every day she felt stronger and more confident. Her hands were getting tough and calloused. Her back was adapting to the physical work, and her mind was getting sharper at solving mechanical problems. She was becoming someone she had never been before. Completely self-reliant, the baby seemed to respond to her growing confidence. The kicks were stronger now, more regular, like the little one was getting ready to be born into a world where his or her mother could handle anything. Mary would often rest her dirty, work-worn hands on her belly and promise the baby that everything would be all right. "We're going to make it to California," she would say. "We're going to have the life your daddy wanted for us. And you're going to grow up knowing that when things get tough, we don't give up. We figure out how to fix what's broken and keep moving forward." As she worked into her 8th month of pregnancy, Mary knew she was racing against time. But she also knew she was going to win that race. The broken carriage was becoming whole again, and so was she. The October morning air was crisp and cold when Mary heard the sound of horses approaching. She was 8 months pregnant now, her belly so large she had to work sitting down most of the time. For the past week she had been making final adjustments. to her repaired carriage, testing every joint and strap to make sure everything would hold together for the long journey ahead. She looked up from tightening a harness buckle to see a man on horseback leading a small herd of cattle down the trail. He was tall and weathered, with the kind of steady posture that came from years in the saddle. His clothes were well made but dusty from travel, and his horse was clearly a fine animal, well fed and well cared for. The man slowed his horse as he got closer, tipping his hat politely. "Morning, ma'am," he called out. "Everything all right here?" Mary straightened up as much as her condition would allow. Over the past month, she had learned to be careful around strangers. Most people were kind, but some saw a pregnant woman alone as either someone to pity or someone to take advantage of. "Good morning," she replied, keeping her voice steady. "Just making some repairs before I head west?" The man dismounted and walked closer, and Mary could see he was probably in his 30s. With kind eyes but a serious expression, he looked at her repaired carriage with obvious interest, then at her swollen belly, then back at the wagon. "You did all this work yourself?" he asked, running his hand along the patched wheel rim. "I did what needed doing," Mary said. The same answer she had been giving everyone who asked that question. The man knelt down to examine the wheel more closely. "This is remarkable work," he said, and Mary could tell he meant it. "I've seen professional wagon makers do worse repairs than this." "How long have you been working on it?" "About a month," Mary answered. Something about this stranger felt different from the others who had stopped to gawk at her work. He wasn't looking at her like she was some kind of curiosity. He was looking at her repairs like he understood the skill and effort that had gone into them. "A month," he repeated, standing up and brushing dust off his hands. "And you're out here alone?" Mary nodded. She had stopped explaining her whole story to every passerby. It took too much energy, and most people either didn't believe her or wanted to argue about what she should do differently. The man looked thoughtful. "My name's Jack Wilson," he said. "I own a cattle ranch about 2 days south of here. I'm driving this herd to market in Denver." He paused, seeming to choose his words carefully. "I've been ranching for 15 years, and I've never seen anyone, man or woman, do this quality of repair work under these conditions." Mary felt a flush of pride at the compliment, but she also felt wary. "Thank you," she said simply. Jack walked around the carriage again, checking her work from different angles. "The wheel alignment is perfect," he said, more to himself than to her. "The harness repairs are clean and strong. Even the way you reinforce that axle crack shows real understanding of how the stress points work." He looked at her with something like respect. "Ma'am, I don't know your story, and I won't pry, but I can see you're heading somewhere important, and I can see you've got the skills to get there. Would you mind if I camped nearby tonight? It's good water here, and my cattle could use the rest." Mary considered this. She had been alone for so long that the idea of company felt strange. But there was something steady and trustworthy about this man. He wasn't offering to rescue her or telling her what she should do. He was simply asking permission to share the campsite. "That would be fine," she said. That evening, as they sat by separate fires about 50 yards apart, Jack told her about his ranch. He had started with nothing, working for other ranchers until he saved enough money to buy his own land. Now he had several hundred head of cattle and was building one of the most successful operations in the territory. "It's hard work," he said, stirring beans in a pot over his fire, "especially doing it alone. I've got some good ranch hands, but at the end of the day, all the big decisions are mine to make." Mary listened as she cooked her own simple supper. She found herself curious about this man who had built something from nothing, just like she was trying to do. "What made you want to ranch?" she asked. Jack smiled, and for the first time his face looked relaxed. "Freedom, I guess. Growing up, I worked for other people my whole life. Always had someone telling me what to do, when to do it, how to do it. When I got my own place, I realized I could make my own choices, succeed or fail based on my own efforts." Mary understood that feeling. These past weeks of fixing her carriage had taught her what it felt like to depend completely on herself. It was scary, but it was also powerful. Over the next 2 days, Jack stayed camped nearby while his cattle grazed and rested. He didn't interfere with Mary's work, but he was there if she needed help lifting something heavy or reaching something high. More importantly, he was someone to talk to during the long evenings. Mary found herself looking forward to their conversations. Jack listened to her stories about the repair work without making her feel like she was bragging or complaining. He asked thoughtful questions about her techniques and even offered a few suggestions that improved her work. "You know," he said on the second evening, "I could use someone with your mechanical skills on my ranch. We're always fixing equipment, repairing buildings, solving problems that require both brain and hands." Mary felt her heart skip a little. "Are you offering me a job?" "I'm saying you've got talents that are valuable," Jack replied carefully. "Real valuable. Any ranch or farm or business would be lucky to have someone who can problem solve like you do." That night, Mary lay in her bedroll thinking about Jack's words. It had been so long since anyone had talked about her skills as something valuable, rather than something unusual. Most people saw a pregnant woman doing repair work and thought it was either inspiring or inappropriate. Jack saw a skilled craftsperson who happened to be pregnant. On the third morning, Jack prepared to move his cattle toward Denver. As he was saddling his horse, Mary felt an unexpected sadness. She had gotten used to having him around, to the sound of another person moving around the campsite in the morning. "Mary," he said, and she realized it was the first time he had used her name. "I want you to know something. What you've done here, fixing this carriage, preparing for your journey while carrying a child, it's the most impressive thing I've ever seen anyone do." He mounted his horse and looked down at her. "I don't know where you're headed or what your plans are when you get there, but I hope you know that you're capable of anything you set your mind to." Mary felt tears starting in her eyes, but they were good tears. "Thank you, Jack. That means more than you know." As she watched him ride away with his cattle, Mary realized that something had changed in how she saw herself. For weeks, she had been focused on survival, on just getting through each day and solving each problem as it came. But Jack had helped her see that she wasn't just surviving, she was succeeding. She was building skills, proving her capabilities, and creating her own path forward. The baby kicked strongly, as if agreeing with her thoughts. Mary placed her hands on her belly and smiled. "Did you hear that, little one? We're not just getting by, we're doing something amazing." 3 days after Jack left with his cattle, Mary knew something was wrong. The baby had been moving differently, and she was feeling pains that came and went like waves. At first, she thought it was just her body getting tired from all the physical work, but as the day went on, the pains got stronger and more regular. By evening, she couldn't ignore what was happening anymore. The baby was coming, and it was coming now. Mary tried not to panic. She had helped deliver calves on her father's farm, and she had watched her mother help other women in their community when their time came. She knew babies could come early, especially when the mother had been through stress and hard work. But knowing something and being ready for it were two different things. She was completely alone. At least 2 days from the nearest town, with a storm building in the distance. The wind was picking up, and she could see dark clouds gathering on the horizon. Mary gathered all her blankets and supplies into the back of her repaired carriage, trying to make a clean, warm space for what was about to happen. The pains were getting stronger now, coming every few minutes. Mary gripped the side of the wagon and breathed through each one like her mother had taught her. "Not yet, little one," she whispered. "We need help. We need someone to come." But no one came. The trail was empty, and the storm was getting closer. Just as the first drops of rain started to fall, Mary heard the sound of horses approaching fast. Through the growing darkness, she saw a rider coming toward her at full speed. As he got closer, she realized with relief and surprise that it was Jack. He jumped off his horse before it had completely stopped. "Mary, I saw the storm coming and turned back. I was worried about you being out here alone." He took one look at her face and immediately understood what was happening. "The baby's coming, isn't it?" Mary nodded, unable to speak as another pain hit her. Jack had helped deliver foals and calves on his ranch, but he had never helped deliver a human baby. Still, he could see that Mary needed help, and there was no time to go for a doctor. "We need to get you inside the wagon out of this storm," he said, putting his arm around her to help her climb up. The rain was starting to come down harder now, and the wind was howling across the prairie. Inside the wagon, Jack helped Mary get comfortable on the blanket she had prepared. He used his own saddle blanket to make a windbreak at the back of the wagon, keeping the worst of the storm out. His hands were shaking a little, but his voice was calm and steady. "I'm going to help you through this," he told her. "I've never delivered a baby, but I've seen enough births on the ranch to know the basics. We're going to take this one step at a time." Mary felt grateful beyond words. She had been so scared of facing this moment alone, and now she had someone with her who was calm and capable. Even though Jack was clearly nervous, he didn't panic or make her feel more afraid. The labor went on through most of the night. Jack stayed with Mary, helping her through each contraction, bringing her water, and talking to her to keep her spirits up. He told her stories about his ranch, about funny things his cattle had done, about the time he had to rescue a calf that got stuck in a mud hole. "You're doing great," he kept telling her. "You're the strongest person I know. This baby is lucky to have you for a mother." As dawn was breaking, Mary's daughter was born. Jack helped deliver the tiny baby girl, his big, work-roughened hands, surprisingly gentle as he cleared her airway and made sure she was breathing. When the baby let out her first strong cry, Jack actually had tears in his eyes. "She's beautiful, Mary," he said, carefully placing the baby in her mother's arms. "She's perfect." Mary looked down at her daughter, Robert's daughter, and felt a love so strong it took her breath away. The baby had dark hair like her father and bright, alert eyes that seemed to look right at her mother. "Hello, little Grace," Mary whispered, using the name she and Robert had chosen months ago. "We made it, sweetheart. We're going to be just fine." Over the next few days, Jack stayed to help Mary recover from the birth. He took care of the horses, cooked their meals, and helped with little Grace when Mary needed to rest. He was amazingly good with the baby, holding her carefully and talking to her in a soft voice that made Grace stop crying and listen. Mary watched Jack with her daughter and felt something she hadn't expected. At first she thought it was just gratitude for his help during such a difficult time. But as the days passed, she realized it was something deeper. She was falling in love with this kind, steady man who had appeared in her life when she needed him most. But it wasn't just because he had rescued her. It was because of how he treated her like an equal, like someone whose opinions and abilities mattered. He asked her advice about things, listened to her ideas, and never made her feel like she was helpless or dependent. "Mary," Jack said one evening as they sat by the fire with baby Grace sleeping between them, "I've been thinking about something, and I hope you won't take this the wrong way." Mary looked at him, wondering what was coming. "I know you're planning to go to California," he continued, "and I respect that. You've worked so hard to fix this wagon and prepare for that journey, but I have to ask, what's waiting for you in California? Do you have family there, a job, a place to live?" Mary was quiet for a moment. The truth was, she didn't have any of those things. California had been Robert's dream, his plan. She had been going there because it was what they had decided together. But now she wasn't sure what she would do when she got there. "I have some money saved," she said finally. "Robert and I were planning to buy land and start a farm." "That's a good plan," Jack said. "But Mary, I want to offer you something different. I want to offer you a partnership." Mary looked at him in surprise. "Not just a job," Jack continued quickly. "A real partnership? Your skills, your intelligence, your strength, they would make my ranch twice as successful as it is now. And Grace would grow up with stability, with a good education, with opportunities." He paused, looking nervous for the first time since she had known him. "And there's something else," he said quietly. "I've fallen in love with you, Mary, not because you needed rescuing, but because you're the most capable, determined, amazing woman I've ever met. I love watching you solve problems. I love how you never give up. I love how gentle you are with Grace and how fierce you are when you're protecting what matters to you." Mary felt her heart racing. She had feelings for Jack too, but she had been afraid to admit them even to herself. "If you'll have me," Jack said, "I'd like to marry you. Not to take care of you, but to build something together. To be partners in every sense of the word. Mary looked at this good man who had helped bring her daughter into the world, who respected her abilities, who wanted to build a future with her based on equality and love. Then she looked at baby Grace, sleeping peacefully in the wilderness, where she had been born. "Yes," Mary said, tears of happiness in her eyes. "Yes, Jack, I'd like that very much." 2 weeks after Grace was born, Mary sat in the back of her carefully repaired carriage, holding her daughter and watching the countryside roll by. But instead of heading west toward California, they were traveling south toward Jack's ranch. The decision to change direction hadn't been easy, but as each mile passed, Mary felt more certain it was the right choice. Jack rode alongside the wagon on his horse, occasionally reaching over to check on Mary and the baby. He had insisted on driving the wagon himself for the first few days after Grace's birth, but Mary had convinced him to let her take the reins again. She was proud of her repaired carriage and wanted to be the one to drive it to her new home. "How much further?" Mary asked as they stopped to rest the horses by a small stream. "About half a day," Jack replied, lifting Grace gently from her mother's arms so Mary could stretch her legs. "You can see the mountains that border my land from here." Mary looked toward the distant peaks and felt a mixture of excitement and nervousness. She was about to start a completely new life, in a place she had never seen, with a man she had known for less than a month. But somehow it felt right. Jack had proven himself to be steady, kind, and trustworthy. More importantly, he saw her as an equal partner, not just someone to take care of. The next morning, they arrived at the ranch. Mary's first impression was of a place that was clearly successful, but still growing. There were several well-built barns, a large corral filled with cattle, and a solid-looking ranch house with a wide front porch. Everything was neat and well-maintained, but Mary could see opportunities for improvement and expansion. "It's beautiful, Jack," she said, meaning it. The ranch sat in a valley with good grass for the cattle and a clear stream running through it. The mountains provided shelter from the worst weather, and there was plenty of room to grow. Jack's ranch hands came out to meet them, 5 men who had worked for Jack for several years. Mary was nervous about how they would react to their boss suddenly arriving with a wife and baby, but they were welcoming and respectful. Word of Iron Mary and her incredible wagon repair had apparently spread even here. "Ma'am," said Pete, Jack's foreman, tipping his hat politely. "We heard about what you did out there on the trail. That's some fine work. Jack's been telling us you've got skills that could help us solve some problems we've been having with equipment." Mary felt relieved. These men were judging her by her abilities, not just seeing her as Jack's new wife. The wedding took place a week later at the small church in the nearest town. It was a simple ceremony with just a few witnesses, Jack's ranch hands, the preacher, and his wife. Mary wore her best dress, the one she had been saving for special occasions during the journey to California. Grace slept peacefully in the preacher's wife's arms during the ceremony. When Jack slipped the gold ring onto Mary's finger, she thought about Robert and the dreams they had shared. She felt sad that he couldn't see how well things had turned out, but she also felt grateful. Robert had given her the courage to start the journey west, and that journey had led her to this new beginning. "Do you, Mary, take Jack to be your husband, to be your partner in all things, in good times and in difficult times?" the preacher asked. "I do," Mary said, looking into Jack's eyes and meaning every word. After the ceremony, they returned to the ranch to begin their new life together. Jack showed Mary around the property, asking for her opinions on everything from the layout of the barns to the placement of the fences. He genuinely wanted her input, and Mary could see dozens of ways to make the operation more efficient. "That corral could be expanded," she said, pointing to the area where they kept the horses. "And if you moved the feed storage closer to the barn, it would save time and effort during the winter." "I've been thinking the same thing," Jack agreed. "But I never had anyone to help me plan it out properly." "2 heads are better than 1. Mary's repaired carriage was given a place of honor in the main barn. Jack had it cleaned and polished, and he told everyone who visited the ranch the story of how his wife had rebuilt it with her bare hands. He was proud of her accomplishment and wanted others to know about it. "This carriage represents everything I love about Mary," he would tell visitors. "Her determination, her intelligence, her refusal to give up when things get difficult. She took something that was broken and made it work again, just like she's doing with our ranch." As the months passed, Mary threw herself into improving the ranch operations. She designed a new system for managing the cattle that reduced the time it took to move them between pastures. She rebuilt the grain storage bins to keep out mice and weather. She even helped design a new barn that was more efficient and easier to maintain. But her greatest joy was watching Grace grow. The baby thrived in the clean mountain air, surrounded by people who loved her. Jack adored his stepdaughter and treated her as if she were his own child from the beginning. He would carry her around the ranch, showing her the animals and telling her about everything they did. "Someday, Grace, this will all be yours," he would say, bouncing her on his knee. "You'll run this ranch with your mother, and it'll be the best operation in the whole territory." Mary loved watching Jack with Grace, but she also made sure her daughter knew about her biological father. She told Grace stories about Robert, how kind he was, how hard he worked, how much he had loved the idea of having a family. "Your first daddy wanted the best possible life for you," Mary would tell Grace as she rocked her to sleep. "And he would be so happy to see how well you're growing up, surrounded by people who love you." One evening, about a year after they had married, Jack and Mary sat on their front porch watching Grace take her first wobbly steps across the yard. The ranch was more successful than ever, with new buildings, improved systems, and a growing herd of cattle. "Do you ever miss California?" Jack asked, putting his arm around Mary's shoulders. Mary thought about the question. California had represented hope and new beginnings when she and Robert had planned their journey. But she had found those things right here, in this valley, with this man who valued her abilities and shared her dreams. "No," she said honestly. "This is better than anything I imagined in California. Here, I'm not just surviving or getting by. I'm building something important with someone who sees me as an equal partner." Jack smiled and kissed the top of her head. "You know, when I first saw you working on that broken carriage, I thought you were the most determined person I'd ever met. But living with you this past year, I've learned you're also the smartest, most capable person I know. This ranch is successful because of your ideas and your work." Mary felt a deep sense of satisfaction. She had started her journey west as Robert's wife, planning to build someone else's dream. She had ended up as Jack's partner, building dreams they created together. The broken carriage in the barn reminded her every day that the most damaged things could be made stronger and more beautiful than they had ever been before. "We did good, didn't we?" she said, watching Grace toddle toward them with a big smile. "We did amazing," Jack replied. "And we're just getting started.